It's time for Off the Rim with Michael Chapman and his guest.
Good morning and welcome to Off the Rim, the weekly look at what's happening in our area and the people who are making those things happen. I'm Michael, your host, and my guest today is Maureen Malchevsky from La Plata County Thrive. How are you this morning, Maureen?
I'm great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for being here, by the way. I think we're here to talk about a pretty important topic in our community, something that I know ever since I've moved here has been an issue, and I'm sure it's an issue in a lot of communities, but it tends to be in a mountain town. You see a lot more need for a living wage. And so I guess my first question is as an organization, for people who don't know, what is Thrive?
Well, our official big name is La Plata County Thrive Living Wage Coalition. So we organized pretty organically starting back in 2012. Just it started from a conversation that people were having about income inequality in the United States. And we got talking about the importance for people in our community to know about that and to start thinking about, well, how do we change that? How do we respond to that? So it was a growing conversation. More people got back into it. And we started coming up with some ideas. We did realize that back in 2008, that a lot of people in La Plata County got together and talked about this issue in the context of developing the Child, Youth, and Family Master Plan. And one area of that master plan was called family economics. And the recommendation of the family economics group was to establish a living wage in La Plata County. But it never got implemented. So long story short, after that was 2008, with the economic downturn, there wasn't funding for implementation. But this group of people felt it was worthwhile to start to try to implement that concept on a volunteer basis.
Gotcha. So is that master plan you were talking about, is that maybe back in the works someday, or?
Well, there were 7 different groups within that. So some of the groups actually have, grown and, are being implemented. The family economics part, as I say, was just not happening for several years until this group of people got together and decided that it was time that we needed to do something.
And so La Plata County Thrive, strictly a volunteer organization?
It's a volunteer except for a part-time coordinator of our employer recognition program.
And speaking of, and I did want to talk about that, so you have an employer recognition program.
Right.
And so I understand you just got your 50th employer on board.
Right.
Why don't you explain what that is, the employer recognition program?
Well, so going back again, when we talked about, well, how do we implement this, and did some research and found out that in the state of Colorado, there is a law that states that municipalities cannot change the minimum wage. Only the state can change the minimum wage. So we're like, okay, well, we can't really, a lot of, you hear about a lot of cities increasing their minimum wage in New Mexico and Washington and states throughout the country. That's been happening quite a bit in the last couple of years. But in Colorado, we can't do that. So we also looked at, well, what other approaches were being taken across the country. And what we did see that there was an employer recognition, 2 other employer recognition programs at that time. One in North Carolina. 3. One in North Carolina, one in Ithaca, New York, and one in Western Massachusetts. And so we said, well, that's something we can do. And also, because we're in a small town, the feedback that we were getting from people here and people who were involved in the Child, Youth, and Family Master Plan development was that it's probably a better approach, the carrot approach rather than the stick approach,
Right.
to doing the employer recognition program as a way to actually educate the community about the importance of a living wage, and to bring recognition to employers who are paying a living wage or aspiring to pay a living wage. So it's a way to have a conversation about the issue, and we've found that it's been extremely successful. We certified our first employers in November of last year. So we're going on 1 year as far as the certification program, and we, in our last review, we certified, we're up to 52 certified
Wow.
employers.
So they're coming in quick.
Yeah,
relatively.
yeah. And a lot of it is word of mouth and having that conversation, and employers setting an example and being proud that they're treating their employees in that way. And a lot of them do talk about respecting their employees and the importance of retention of those employees, in terms of their productivity, in terms of cost. That employee turnover is very expensive for employers.
And so, I mean, I'm curious, and I know there's a number, but what is a living wage in La Plata County?
So we are calculating the living wage with the Region 9 Economic Development District, using certain national standards for doing that, and also looking at very local costs in terms of especially housing and daycare that are we feel are more accurate than what some of the national organizations are coming up with. So we can look at that locally and get a better figure. So the first time we calculated it with Region 9 was last year, and it was $12.40. And then we're looking at it every year. And recently, for this year, it's $12.79. The employers who have been certified to this point were certified at the $12.40 rate. But
Okay.
going forward, the next employers will have $12.79 as the rate.
Well, and that's for a single person, yes?
That is for a single person because that's how employers pay people.
Sure.
They don't take into account the fact that if somebody has a couple kids and maybe somebody in preschool, and that those costs of living go up significantly.
Sure, yeah. Well, and you were talking about health care and child care. Or actually, you weren't. I mentioned health care, but child care and housing seem to be the big skew on that number in La Plata County. I know living here, housing is expensive. How does that, how does that $12.79, how does that compare to the rest of the state? I mean, do other counties in the state, have a living wage coalition? I guess is my question.
No.
So that's not. This is unique.
It is unique. As I said, when we started our program, there were 3 employer recognition programs in the country, and now there are 6, but there are no other in Colorado. And I mean, there are certainly other mostly workers organizations nationwide that fight for improved wages. So, but our program right now is just looking at is really dealing with the employer recognition program.
So what I'd like to, you were talking about municipalities being able to set their own minimum wage, and that in Colorado, that's forbode,
Right.
for whatever reason. But there were a couple of House bills in the last year,
Right.
concerning a living wage, and the first was that municipalities being able to determine their own minimum wage, and my understanding is that didn't make it very far.
Right.
And the other one had to do, I believe, with we were talking before the show about incrementally increasing the minimum wage over the time. And so is that bill as well just non-existent anymore, or?
Right. That bill did not get the support that it needed, and the next step would be for that to go to a ballot initiative, which we're expecting that's going to happen next year.
Okay, that's hopefully
so that will go to the citizens to vote on.
Well, hopefully they. Well, and so speaking of that, and I wanted to talk about some misconceptions of a living wage, because that tends to be a hurdle, I think, for voters who are out there trying to make a decision, and they, of course, people come up with all these reasons why that's a bad thing. What are some of the misconceptions about somebody who is either a low-income earner or about paying a living wage? What's that going to do to the economy? What are some of the misconceptions?
Yeah. One that I've heard now and again is that people who are paid a low wage really don't need more money, that it's especially in a town like Durango, where people see a lot of college students working in the restaurants and so on. Sometimes the picture that people have created is that they're kids who are living at home with their parents, and the money that they're making is for skiing and beer. And I'm sure that is true in some cases, but I have been to Fort Lewis College and met with people there, and I know that there are a whole lot of students that are working real hard to cover not only housing costs, but for their books, fees. Even if their tuition is being paid, some of the Native American students don't need to pay tuition, but also they have transportation expenses and books, and sometimes can't meet those needs.
Sure.
The students that need to pay for housing, I don't make the assumption that young people want to live with their parents or want to live with a whole bunch of other people in a lousy substandard house.
Sure.
And the other thing is, when young people are finished with college, when they've graduated and do decide to settle down, maybe have a family, can they afford to stay here?
Well, I was looking at the website, which is thrivelaplata.org. Yes.
Yes.
Great resource, by the way. But in reference to young workers, really the percentage of people not making a living wage are not necessarily students.
Right.
Right. Was it 35?
Right.
Is the vast majority.
Right.
And trying to earn a living for their family. So.
Exactly. And as I say, sometimes the people we see who are working low wage jobs are working in restaurants, waiting, and often in the back of the house, in the kitchen. It's actually lower paid workers who are washing dishes and in food production, or in motels making beds, and they're often parents and in their 30s or older.
And so, well, you're listening to Off the Rim here on KDUR. My guest this morning is Maureen Malchevsky with La Plata County Thrive. We're talking about some misconceptions of a living wage. We talked about low-wage workers being young, which is actually not the case. What about education? How does that play into earning a living wage? I've heard that people say, well, they need to go to college.
Yeah, it's like, I think that sometimes when I talk to people who have some perceptions of who low-wage workers are, they're thinking back to when they were getting started. And yeah, they didn't make much money and they worked hard, but the truth is that especially since the Great Recession, that a lot of people who are well educated have, definitely graduated from high school and college education are not able to get the jobs that, when I was starting to go into the work world, 40 years ago, it was accepted if you went to college that, yeah, you could go out and get a job, and that's just not true anymore. Not a professional job. So we do have lots of people with college education who, are waiting tables, are taking whatever they can get.
Well,
That's just the economy today.
And they're 2 or 3 jobs, just
Yep.
to make it. One more thing about the misconceptions. I think that's probably the biggest barrier to legislation and
Right.
having people get on board. But people are worried about how a living wage is going to affect their community, and am I going to have to pay more for goods and services? And what's your experience with that? What's your
Yeah, I can refer to research that's been done that has looked at communities where the wage has gotten increased significantly, and that there has not been a negative impact. And those studies have been done, and as more and more municipalities and states increase their minimum wage to something closer to a living wage, there will be more and more research, and there are reference to those studies on our website. So far, the dire predictions that and ideas, the concerns that people have about what's going to happen, it just hasn't panned out that way.
Yeah, well, and I think those people also probably put a lot of money back into the community. If you're making more money, you can spend more money, and
Yeah, especially in people who are making aren't making large amounts of money. Kind of the middle income folks. If they have any disposable money, they're not putting it into stocks. They're spending it in the community. So actually, yeah, that does boost the economy of the community. And it's interesting. I mean, people say, well, I'll have to pay more, when I go out for a hamburger. And actually, and that study's cited on our website also, that analysis has been done if, in the fast food places, if those workers were paid a living wage, how much more would I have to pay for a hamburger? Or if in the big box stores, if wages were improved for those workers, and really it's pennies that the cost to the consumer goes up, so it's very minimal, whereas the standard for those workers is increased incredibly.
And once again, I want to mention the website again, because just in preparing for this, it was an incredible resource with books and movies, and this is what we're about, and that's thrivelaplata.org, and it also goes, there's a lot of ways that you can get involved through that website, and one I definitely want to talk about is that you guys are having a fundraiser this week.
We are on Thursday at the Red Snapper from 5 to 7. We're really looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. Costumes, special thriving drinks, and it's our first fundraiser that we've had. So we're really excited about it. We are going to have a silent auction. There's the community's been very generous in donating items for the silent auctions. We have some great stuff. And yeah, I'm gonna be in costume at the door, so come see us.
Well, and everybody's welcome. Just show up.
Everybody's welcome to show up for sure. we will have a tip jar, and that's how we're going to raise a lot of the funds are just tipping at the bar. We also get some of the proceeds from our special drinks and then from the silent auction. And so people should bring their cash and their checkbooks. I think that we're going to be accepting credit cards, but if you can bring a checkbook, that would be easier.
Go to the ATM first.
Yeah. And this is, it is really important. As I say, we have, probably 35 or so very active volunteers in our organization that do a tremendous amount of work, and just our part-time coordinator for the employee recognition program. But we do pay her a very living wage, and even though it's a part-time job.
Sure.
And so that's what we need to keep the program going. We've gotten mostly local donations is how we're surviving, and a couple small grants.
Well, and so that's one way to get involved. The fundraiser this Thursday at the Red Snapper from 5 to 7.
Right.
Great way to get involved. I know there are, obviously becoming a certified employer.
Right.
So you said 52, but the other day it was 50, and so you've picked up 2 and.
Well, we do the certifications 3 times a year. So we reached our 50, our goal of 50, and then we surpassed it by 2. Yeah.
And so another way, I was, again, back to the website because it really is a great resource. I know you guys have coalition meetings.
Right.
The second Monday of each month?
Yes.
And is that open to?
That is. Yep. And that information's on the website, but that's open to everybody. We are really hoping, and it's very difficult for low-wage workers to have time to do anything besides work multiple jobs and take care of family and whatnot, but we certainly do want to involve more low-wage workers to get involved. We have a steering committee. We're looking for new members for our steering committee, or additional members for our steering committee. There's lots of work to do as far as especially people who have skills with social media, website. There's all kinds of things to help with.
Well, and I noticed there's testimonials involved on the website, and
exactly.
That's nice feedback, I guess, to have.
It's really important to hear from, and that's why I say we want low-wage workers. So when we say low-wage workers, we mean anybody who's not making at least a living wage, or maybe maybe you are now, but maybe in the past you weren't, or even people who are making a living wage. What does that mean to you? Or if you're not making it, what does that mean? As far as, spending time with family, being able to continue your education. What does it mean? And I think that's when we're talking about the misconceptions. I can talk about the misconceptions, but we really need to hear from low-wage workers about what does this mean to your life. And that's who the message needs to come from for people to understand, these are real people, and it's a large portion, somewhere around a quarter of the people in La Plata County that are living this, and they need to tell their stories. And so we do have a way to do that on our website, and would really appreciate if people can share that information.
And so I want to go, and we haven't really gone into it yet, and so I'm curious, how did you get involved in this? I mean, how did this, I know you how long is this, was it something that was just over, Go ahead. Tell me.
I think back in, as I said, back in like 2012, it's the end of 2012, and there was a group of people just, talking about this issue of income inequality, and it's, something that I was aware of, but to have local people, more people around you have that conversation, and then to find out that, yeah, this conversation has been going on in this community for a while, and then looking around, and yeah, there are organizations looking at housing and education and all of these things that help us to be a sustainable community. But nobody was really addressing in this way the income issue. So when we talk about sustainability of our community, we need to look at all of these pieces, and
Sure.
it's a piece that really wasn't being addressed, and it's like, it's the elephant in the room. I mean, it's huge.
Right.
When, I moved here from Buffalo, New York, and the cost of housing is a fraction. At least it was then. I think it's come up a little bit, but it was a fraction of, we moved here 9 years ago, and just incredible, and so to me it was very real, because in Buffalo, my husband and I could have retired, but we had to continue to work.
Right.
And so I'm thinking, wow, what about young people that have the expenses of child care and other expenses, and the food costs going up and healthcare costs going up. So it seemed like a gap, as many as nonprofits as we have in this community. It seemed like there was a hole there that needed to be filled.
Well, I'm glad it's here. I think it's an important thing for the community to support. Once again, Maureen Malachevsky with La Plata County Thrive, and we're about out of time, but we got a little bit left. I wanted to mention the website again. It's a great resource, and if you want to learn more or volunteer, thriveLaPlata.org. Definitely the fundraiser this Thursday at the Red Snapper from 5 to 7. You have any smoking gun, any bullets, anything to end with that we may have missed, or that you'd like to talk about briefly?
No, I think this is a long-term struggle. It's, we've been neglecting wages in this country for decades. And so, if anybody wants to join us and hang in there and see if we can help turn it around, at least in our neck of the woods.
Sounds good to me. You've been listening. Thanks for joining me,
Yeah,
Maureen.
thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure. You've been listening to Off the Rim. My guest has been Maureen Malachevsky with La Plata County Thrive Living Wage Coalition. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.